Last month, almost the exact date while I was on vacation, I had a video go up talking about the possibility of who the final specialist may be in regards to Black Ops 4. It seemed like a no-brainer discussion and talking point given that we'd seen a specialist introduced with every single operation changeover, and the next one right now currently is slated for, at the moment, pending no adjustments to the dates, September 23rd, making this the final operation launch of the game's main year of content support. But the more and more I thought about what we discussed about the idea of potentially seeing Blackjack return, it kept feeling more and more off the more I thought about it. Compound that on with what we know now, but didn't at the time, that we'll see the next operation kick off on September 23rd, just barely a month left on the life cycle of Black Ops 4, and it makes for a really interesting timing for a new launch. And even furthering the feeling of uncertainty now, we've seen more and more remakes coming in rehashes in content. One of the most notable as of late was the Twitch Prime selection, which was a full month offering of Twitch Prime just of repeated items. With presumably so much of Treyarch shifting to the next title they have to deliver reportedly in 2020, the end of Black Ops 4 may not just be coming, but already be happening. So what I want to discuss today is what that means for the ultimate fate of Black Ops 4's Operation 6, the final content update presumably for Black Ops 4 before we jump into Modern Warfare just a little bit over a month later. Before we begin, all this is theoretical and of course is entirely possible to be off the mark, but we're using some educated guesses and some thoughts here to take a look at what's available to analyze. Additionally, if you want to stay up to date with all things COD, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I like to keep as many of you guys informed as possible, but anyways, the ultimate fate of Operation 6. Now, starting at the beginning, we mentioned this will kick off on September 23rd, which is already our first, not really red flag, but kind of odd indication, if we can call it that. Normally, each operation lasts 70 days. Which is a perfect stretch from an update day of a Tuesday to the morning leading into another Tuesday about 2 months later. But this time around, it's not a perfect match. September 23rd is a Monday, which we've never seen before in Black Ops 4 outside of a preloading update for Absolute Zero, but nothing really accessible outside of the 2 new weapons at that point added into the Blackout map. Everything else was time-gated, and even I think those weapons were a mistake that they made its way into Blackout. But this is supposed to be launching the day the beta ends for Modern Warfare, which is also curious given the fact that betas have a decent track record of getting extended. So I think that the timing of everything with the next operation, given there is no adjustment, just makes to set off for an incredibly odd event that may be out of the ordinary overall, not just timing wise, and we'll break down why in just a few seconds, but I keep coming back to this. All this is happening with 1 month left on the year as a whole for Black Ops 4, so the timing is just odd. And that's what kind of sets up the rest of this is maybe being unconventional. But let's talk formatting with this in mind, because I think that's also where we may see our first difference compared to other recent operations. The past few operations have been relatively stable in their offerings. Both Apocalypse Z and Spectre Rising follow the same formatting patterns, save for the tiers that were offered. Apocalypse Z only differed slightly in the distribution of said tiers, where it was a little less up front and a little more on the second half, but what the last 2 operations have established is this pattern of half up front, half later down the line at the midpoint of the operation. We saw that Operation Spectre Rising introduced us to a new specialist, new maps, new content like weaponry and tiers and so on, but then Days of Summer came around, not completing that operation, but instead being that middle ground, and offered some more major updates in terms of new map updates for Blackout, a new Zombies Gauntlet and content there, a free map in the way of grind and MP, weapons placed unfortunately exclusively in reserves, and so on and so forth. So there was a major content drop at that halfway point. But the biggest part was again that this wasn't all up front, which was the first time that we had seen this, which then prolonged the life of the operation and didn't have these dry spells come into play like how we did with week 5, 6, or 7 before in operations previously. Same thing went for Operation Apocalypse Z. New tiers, new gears, new reserves, new maps, and more on launch of the first half, and then the second half introduced us to a few new game modes, new weapons, and so on and so forth. But this also again utilized the full 70 days of that operation, so it could afford a 50-50 split. Some up front, some in the middle. But September 23rd to October 25th and the release of Modern Warfare, that's only 32 days, just over half of what we'd normally see for the duration of an operation, which brings in my mind the idea of well, maybe we won't be seeing an event with two halves. Maybe we won't see a traditional event in the way that we've seen it as of recently. The way I see it coming, I think this may be just one final go at whatever is available to players given that time duration. Plus, again, let's not forget that Treyarch are probably already moving on almost in full to their next reported 2020 title in the Black Ops universe, which kind of sets the stage for a lot of what we'll discuss elsewhere in this in terms of maps and the rest of the contents to follow, because there may very well be not as many people working on it. Let's talk about the contents that we may see with Operation 6. We know that we're guaranteed a few things map-wise because we have to get the maps to fulfill the promises of the Black Ops Pass. We're still owed 2 maps in MP and 1 in Zombies. We're not owed any more Black Ops Pass characters for Blackout like how we saw with Apocalypse Z. We didn't get anything added. Instead, they were just put into reserves, the new ones there. But the 2 things you can absolutely guarantee in content-wise are 2 MP maps and a Zombies map. As for MP maps, this is where it's kind of up in the air. It may be a thematic-based thing like we talked about recently with the final operation and how we saw zombies-related maps in Remnant and Der Schatten tying in with the zombies theme of the operation for Apocalypse Z. Or it could be something completely unrelated, just something thrown out there, or perhaps we can brace ourselves for another remake or 2. The last 2 operations we saw the introduction of WMD and then recently Havana. It wouldn't be entirely out of line to anticipate remakes, given the fact that, again, perhaps a large majority of staffing has had to move on to the next project, whether we or even they like it or not. Simply put, I'm expecting a lot of what's to come to be a slow drop-off into no more support for the title. I'd hoped a few months ago that we'd see the final operation kind of end out on a bang with some real fan service and celebration type stuff, but the shift is likely already started, so I don't think we'll be seeing all hands on deck to come to close with one final shebang for the operation. Anyways, Zombies, though, we talked about that the rumors are floating around out there that the final map for the season of Black Ops 4 is going to be a remake. The one out there in the wind right now at the moment is Call of the Dead, a remake of that. In what capacity? Who knows? We already saw that Danny Trejo is in the game for Blackout, but I'd imagine that we won't see the return of George Romero, being that 1, he's since passed away since Call of the Dead was released in Black Ops 1, and 2, it wouldn't be fitting nor respectful for a recast of that, but we'll have to wait and see, obviously. We'll know soon enough here, as Treyarch ended up posting in their blog post today, actually saying that Zombies teasers for DLC 4 will start as early as of next week. And so that might actually mean this drops ahead of schedule compared to Operation 6, but kind of throwing it in that larger, broader brushstroke of what will be Operation 6. It may very well drop with the upcoming title update right before the beta of Modern Warfare that will give multiplayer Jungle Flooded. That's something to consider as well. Talking further contents, again, we have to bear in mind that shift to the 2020 workload, but coming back to how we started the entire video off, specialist-wise, I'm not so sure that we'll even get one at this point. There's a couple of factors that could happen. 2, I guess, key branches, though, with some things underneath them. 1, it's either business as usual and we get a new specialist, to which, if that's the case, it's either a new specialist or a returning specialist. Or maybe we don't get a specialist, in which maybe that's a result of it being too late in the life cycle for a new specialist to be relevant or to play with balancing or whatever the case may be. Or 2, maybe there's just no logical avenue for a specialist introduction at this point for Operation 6. So to put these things into perspective, let's take a look at them. Again, let's say this is business as usual and we'll get a specialist despite being 1 month from the game turning obsolete for many. And despite the fact that developmental support for this game will be minimal at this point, who could we even bring into the game? We theorized Blackjack last month, but at the same time, the more and more I think about it, that brings up even more conflict of its own. If Blackjack comes, that completely nullifies the rarity of the Blackout character, and I don't think they'd pull a Reaper and have a Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4 version, especially because the Blackout character is the Black Ops 4 version of Blackjack. So you can't add Black Ops 3's Blackjack as a specialist when the storyline takes place before Black Ops 3. So that just creates a whole mess and confusion of its own, and despite maybe you or I not caring about it, it would cut into Activision's potential for sales of supply drops for players that want that Blackout character. Again, I've made my stance known on microtransactions in Black Ops 4, so I couldn't care less if we got something for free out of that and it kind of cut into that, but from a business perspective, I don't think that would happen. But what about a brand new specialist? Truthfully, I don't know if that's the case because specialists are a bit more of a balancing act than anything else, almost to the point of weaponry and gunplay. The balance needs a lot of hands on deck to get right, and this close to launch of Modern Warfare, it may not truthfully be worth the hassle despite us maybe wanting a new specialist. This then brings me to the thought of the alternative. What if we don't get a new specialist? it may not have a logical avenue for a new specialist in the lore, gameplay, or elsewhere for it to work out. Specialists are, from my understanding with conversations I've had with some of the developmental team, a bit more of an immediate addition compared to, say, maps. While we're guaranteed maps from the Black Ops Pass, we are, 1, not guaranteed a new specialist, and 2, not on the same timetable for progression and development as maps either. Maps, if the studio's schedule of development is still the same from Black Ops 3 in the last real in-depth talk that I had about the calendar and how they work ahead, Treyarch works on maps just about 2 map packs in advance. So that means that when we were out at Treyarch for early footage of Grand Heist earlier in the year, they would have been working on the maps that we see now of Der Schatten, Remnant, and Havana that launched with Apocalypse Z somewhere off in the corners of the office so that we nosy YouTubers couldn't see anything that far out. But that would be the comparative timetable. Specialists aren't worked that far in advance, so it's very possible they could have scrapped one, they could have never had one coming, or something in between. And that could ultimately change the offering that Operation 6 has compared to the last few. If it's not necessarily, say, a full operation, who's to say that we get a full operation's worth of the base contents and what else is thrown in the mix there? 32 days certainly isn't a full operation, so maybe this again throws everything out that we knew of and changes it up as a sort of just soft transition outside of Black Ops 4 and into Modern Warfare. And I think the final thing that will be affected by the shorter timetable is that of the tiers. I really don't know how I anticipate this one going. There's something that I feel would just be so bad that it would happen, but it wouldn't surprise me if it does. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some throwback items within the tiers for this operation, where we don't have tremendous amounts of new contents, either in the tiers or even in reserves, but instead a lot of things like maybe the signature weapons from First Strike being a tier 1 through 5 or something like that. Having it maybe be an all-star cast would be really cool of the throwback items, but for players that have already played the game and grinded everything out, it would be an absolute worthless stream there. So it could play catch-up for the players that didn't, but also could be something where it doesn't really offer much new. But at the same time, I also think, wow, that would never happen, right? Like, that's too crazy. That's something that would anger too many players, but I really don't know. Twitch Prime, even for a good example, was something that gave us 5 months of new and free content if you had those accounts linked up, but even the 6th and final month offered just a rehash of everything that came through at once. And again, with so many possibly leaving for the next title already and being full on in grind mode for the 2020 year, well, is it that far out of the ordinary? I'm gonna say yes, hopefully that it still is, that it wouldn't go that far, but in terms of the ultimate fate, I don't know if I'm necessarily anticipating a specialist. I'm probably anticipating at least one more remake of the 2 maps that we end up getting for the Black Ops Pass. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of rehashes in the shop or the tiers or the reserve content from stuff that we've already seen beforehand, and just kind of, unfortunately, letting this thing down. I don't want to say like a hard drop off, but kind of just phasing itself out so that Modern Warfare picks up very shortly thereafter. 32 days to be exact from PlayStation 4, and even less actually, now that I think about it, on Xbox One and PC side, which is even weirder that you're not even going to have a full month on that operation. But that's where we're going to wrap it up. So kind of just wanted to voice some thoughts here that have been running through my head, thinking about some of the things we've talked about before with the next operation, and maybe clarifying some stances on it, maybe adjusting and amending some theories that we've had. But anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4 and all things Modern Warfare, anything relating to Call of Duty. We got you covered here on the channel. So if any of that interests you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, there's the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. Well, let's send out of the way. Thank you guys all so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.